At the office, I suddenly felt dizzy. I went outside and collapsed. When I opened my eyes, I saw someone removing my ring. "What are you doing?" "My son gave me this," he whispered. "That's why you're feeling so terrible. Look, I never expected my son would do something so vicious. It's time for me to take back everything." Welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Drop your location in the comments. I love knowing who's here. Quick note, this narrative uses dramatized details for impact, but the message stays genuine. Let's dive in. The January rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Preston Properties boardroom, 58 stories above downtown Seattle. I stood at the head of the mahogany table looking out at the 8 faces that had helped me build this company over 3 decades. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "thank you for braving this weather. I know Queen Anne Hill was practically a ski slope this morning." Polite laughter rippled through the room. Charles Bennett adjusted his reading glasses and smiled. Sandra Phillips, elegant in her navy suit, nodded encouragingly toward the door. Nicole walked in. At 40, my daughter moved with quiet confidence. She wore a charcoal blazer, her dark hair pulled back in a way that reminded me of her mother. She set down her leather portfolio and caught my eye. That small smile steadied me. Keith entered moments later. My son was 48, but the tightness around his mouth aged him. His expensive suit, his precisely knotted tie, everything about him screamed control. He nodded curtly and took his seat at the far end of the table, avoiding my eyes. The distance between us felt like more than 12 feet of wood. "Let's begin," I said. "Nicole, you're up. The waterfront project." She rose smoothly and clicked the remote. The screen lit up with stunning renderings, a mixed-use development along Elliott Bay glass and steel catching imaginary sunlight green spaces woven between residential towers. The waterfront project represents the future of urban living in Seattle. Nicole began, her voice clear. 12 acres combining affordable housing with luxury condominiums, retail, and public waterfront access. Total value $125 million. She moved through slides with practiced ease. Sustainability metrics, community impact studies, partnerships with neighborhood groups. Charles leaned forward, nodding. Sandra made impressed notes. "From 30% of units will be workforce housing." Nicole continued, passion in her voice. "Teachers, nurses, city employees, people who make Seattle run but can't afford to live here." This was Nicole, at her best, brilliant, compassionate, strategic. She'd brought something to Preston Properties. I'd been searching for a vision that honored what we'd built while pushing us forward. I glanced at Keith. He sat perfectly still, hands folded, face carefully neutral. But I'd known my son 48 years. I recognized that posture, rigid shoulders, clenched jaw. I'd seen it during the Bellevue Commons disaster 3 years ago, when his cost overruns nearly lost us a major client. Keith said nothing. He rarely did anymore. Nicole finished to genuine applause. "Questions?" "When do you anticipate breaking ground?" Charles asked. "Late spring, assuming permits clear? 42-month timeline?" Sandra raised her hand. "Nicole, this is exceptional work. Lawrence, you must be incredibly proud." I couldn't help smiling. "I am. Nicole has brought something special, a vision that honors what we've built while pushing us into the future." I paused. "Which is why I'm recommending we create a new position, Chief Operating Officer. And I can think of no one better qualified than Nicole." Congratulations erupted. Charles stood to shake Nicole's hand. Sandra embraced her. Angela Martinez, my assistant, beamed. Nicole's cheeks flushed. "Dad, I'm honored. Truly." "You've earned it," I said simply. At the far end, Keith's jaw tightened. his folded hands pressed together until his knuckles went white. When Sandra glanced his way, he forced a smile, but his eyes remained flat. "Keith," I said, trying to bridge the distance. "Any thoughts on the waterfront project?" Silence stretched. 3 heartbeats. 4. "It's solid work," Keith said, finally, voice controlled. "Nicole always delivers." The words were right, but they landed like stones in still water. Everyone heard what wasn't said. Charles and Sandra exchanged glances. Nicole's joy dimmed. "Good," I said, forcing brightness. "Let's move on." Keith was already standing, gathering his tablet. "Excuse me. I have a call with the Redmond contractor at 11. Can't miss it." He was out before I could respond. Uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Sandra cleared her throat. Charles studied his notes with sudden intensity. Nicole stared at the closed door. I exhaled slowly, feeling suddenly older than 72. "Let's take a 10-minute break." When the meeting ended, I lingered at the window, looking out at Puget Sound's gray expanse through the rain. "He's angry," Angela said quietly behind me. "I know. He thinks you're choosing Nicole over him." "I'm choosing the best person for the job." The words came sharp. I softened my voice. "Keith is my son. I love him. But he's not ready. Not after Bellevue Commons." Angela nodded. "You're making the right call." The reassurance felt hollow. After she left, I stood alone, watching rain blur the city below. I told myself Keith would understand eventually. He was my son. He loved me. But standing there, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Something in Keith's eyes when I'd announced Nicole's promotion, something cold and calculating, had lodged itself in my chest like a splinter. I should have paid attention to that feeling. It might have saved me weeks of pain, but I didn't. I walked away from that window believing the worst was behind us. I was wrong. The days after that board meeting felt heavier, like Seattle's gray winter had settled inside my chest. I kept replaying Keith's exit, the careful precision, the door closing with finality. I tried to reach out. Tuesday evening, I called Keith's cell. "Hey son, wanna grab dinner? Pike Place has that new steakhouse you mentioned." "Can't, Dad. Back-to-back meetings all week." Polite. Distant. The tone you'd use with a business associate you were avoiding. Thursday then, traveling to Redmond. Rain check. The rain check never came. Friday. I dropped by his office with coffee from the place near his apartment. His door was half open. I knocked anyway. "Got a minute?" Keith looked up from his laptop. Something flickered across his face. Annoyance, fear, then vanished, replaced by careful neutrality. "Sure, Dad." "What's up?" I set the coffee on his desk. "Just wanted to check in." "I'm fine. Busy." I didn't sit, sensing I wasn't welcome. "The waterfront project, Nicole could use your input on construction timelines. You've always been good with that." "I'm sure she's got it covered." He sipped coffee without looking at me. "She always does right." The edge in his voice was subtle but sharp. "Keith." "Dad, I have a call in 5 minutes. Was there something specific?" I stood there looking at my son, my firstborn, the boy I'd taught to throw a baseball, and felt like I was staring at a stranger. "No, nothing specific. I just miss you, son." He nodded, already turning back to his laptop. "See you around the office." I left the coffee on his desk, probably cold by the time he drank it. That evening, Nicole stopped by my office. She'd changed into jeans and a sweater hair, down no longer the polished executive, just my daughter. "Not Dad, can we talk?" She closed the door and sat across from me. "Have you noticed Keith's been off?" I sighed. I've been trying to connect, but he's avoiding you. Won't return my calls either? He took the COO announcement hard. I rubbed my face, exhausted. He's not ready, honey. You've earned this. Keith needs more time. I know, but Dad, I don't want this promotion to destroy our family. It won't. I said it with more confidence than I felt. Keith loves us. He's just adjusting. My birthday's coming up. 2 weeks. I was thinking we'd have dinner at the house. Just family. Maybe it'll give us a chance to reconnect. You think he'll come? He's my son. Of course he'll come. But doubt crept in like cold water under a door. The next morning I had my quarterly checkup with Dr. Patrick Reynolds at UW Medical Center. Patrick had been my cardiologist for nearly 20 years. And more than that, he'd been a friend. We'd met at a charity gala in the early 2000s, bonded over sailing stories from the San Juans, and he'd been monitoring my heart ever since my long QT diagnosis. Lawrence. Patrick said, studying my charts. Your rhythm looks stable. EKG is good. How have you been feeling? Fine. Maybe tired, but that's work. Stress is a trigger for long QT. You need to be careful. He tapped his pen against the clipboard. Remember the contraindications. No certain medications. Avoid strong magnetic fields. Keep electrolytes balanced. I nodded, half listening. I'd heard this before. I'm serious, Lawrence. Long QT can be managed, but you have to be vigilant. One wrong trigger. He snapped his fingers. Cardiac arrest. You might not get another chance. I understand. I'm being careful. He printed prescriptions and an updated list of things to avoid. I folded it into my wallet, where it would live unread until the next appointment. Walking to my car, I called Angela. Can you set up dinner at the house February 14th? Just family, Nicole and Keith. Keep it simple. Elizabeth's china. That chocolate cake from the French bakery she loved. Of course. Make sure Keith gets a personal call from me. I want him to know how much I want him there. Understood. I sat in my car, rain drumming on the roof, thinking about turning 72. My father had died at 68, heart attack, sudden, no warning. I'd built something I was proud of. Preston Properties wasn't just buildings and balance sheets. It was legacy, impact, purpose. And I wanted to pass it to my children with my own hands, not through lawyers after I was gone. 2 weeks until my birthday. 2 weeks to show Keith there was room for both my children in my heart, in my company, in my legacy. I started the car and headed home, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks: hope. I left the medical center feeling optimistic. My heart was stable. My company was thriving. Nicole was stepping into leadership beautifully. Even Keith, I told myself, would come around once he saw I wasn't pushing him aside, just making room for both my children to shine. The birthday dinner would be a chance to reconnect, to remind him he was still my son, still valued. I didn't know that in 2 weeks, Keith would give me a gift that would nearly end my life. All I knew then was hope. The rain had finally stopped by the morning of February 14th. I woke early, too early really, and lay in bed watching the pale winter light creep across the ceiling of the master bedroom. 72 years old. The number felt surreal, almost foreign, like a suit that didn't quite fit anymore. Downstairs, Angela had already arrived. I could hear her moving through the kitchen, the soft clink of Elizabeth's china being arranged on the dining table. The same plates we'd used for every birthday since Nicole was born. The same crystal glasses. The same linen napkins, now faded but still elegant, that Elizabeth had insisted on for special occasions. I dressed slowly, charcoal slacks, a white Oxford shirt, a navy sweater Elizabeth had given me years ago. It still fit, though the cuffs were starting to fray. I ran my fingers over the worn fabric and felt the familiar ache. 8 years. She'd been gone 8 years, and some mornings I still reached for her across the bed. By 6 o'clock, the house smelled like roasted chicken garlic and rosemary, Elizabeth's recipe. Angela had outdone herself. The dining room glowed with candlelight, the table set for 4, though I suspected Keith might find a reason not to come. Nicole arrived first at 6:15, carrying a bottle of Pinot Noir and a small wrapped box. She kissed my cheek and handed me the wine. "Happy birthday, Dad." "Thank you, sweetheart." I held her for a moment longer than necessary. She smelled like lavender and rain. We stood in the foyer waiting. The clock ticked. 6:20, 6:25. I was about to suggest we start without him when the doorbell rang. Keith. He stood on the porch in a dark wool coat, his hair damp from the mist. In his hands was a small velvet box, deep blue, elegant, with a gold clasp. "Happy birthday, Dad." His voice was softer than usual, almost gentle. "Keith." I stepped aside to let him in. "I'm glad you came." He handed me the box without ceremony. "I wanted to give this to you before dinner. It's personal." Nicole appeared at my side, her eyes flicking between us. The air felt charged like the moment before a thunderstorm. I opened the box. Inside, nestled in black silk, was a ring platinum thick-banded with a brushed finish that caught the light. At its center was a raised emblem, geometric and modern, etched with precision. And along the inner band, I could see the faint outline of engraving. I lifted it carefully. The ring was heavier than I expected, solid, in a way that felt substantial, almost alive. "Turn it over," Keith said quietly. I did. The inscription read EPLP, Elizabeth's initials, my initials, a heart between them. Something tight and fragile broke open in my chest. "Keith." I looked up at him, my vision blurring. It's from both of us," he said. His voice was steady, but I could hear the edge of emotion beneath it. "From me and Mom. I had it made last year. I wanted to give you something that would keep her close. Always." I couldn't speak. I just stared at the ring, at the initials, at the weight of it in my palm. Nicole stepped closer, her hand on my shoulder. "Dad, it's beautiful." Keith cleared his throat. "There's more. The ring, it's not just symbolic. It uses biomagnetic resonance therapy. It's cutting-edge technology. The core generates a low-level magnetic field that's supposed to support cardiovascular health. I did a lot of research. I wanted something that would actually help you, not just sit there." I blinked. "Magnetic therapy. It's FDA approved in Europe," Keith said quickly. He pulled a folded certificate from his coat pocket and handed it to me. The letterhead read, Swiss Health Technologies, LLC. The field strength is calibrated specifically for your condition. It's perfectly safe, but you have to wear it 24/7 for it to be effective. That's the only catch. I looked down at the ring again. The emblem, the raised geometric design, must have housed the magnetic core. I ran my thumb over it, feeling the faint warmth of the metal. "You did all this?" I asked. Keith nodded. "I wanted to give you something meaningful, something that would help." After the board meeting, I realized I've been distant. "I'm sorry, Dad. I want us to be close again." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. I felt the last of my doubts dissolve. "Thank you, son." I slipped the ring onto my left ring finger, the same finger Elizabeth's wedding band had once graced. It fit perfectly. Nicole squeezed my shoulder. "It suits you, Dad." I held up my hand, watching the candlelight play across the platinum. The ring felt warm, almost too warm, but I chalked it up to the heat of my own skin. "Let's eat," I said, my voice thick. "Before everything gets cold." Dinner was everything I'd hoped for. We laughed, We talked about the waterfront project, about Nicole's plans for the spring groundbreaking, about Keith's upcoming trip to Vancouver. For the first time in weeks, it felt like we were a family again. But as I reached for my wine glass, I felt a faint flutter in my chest. A skip. A hesitation. I paused, my hand hovering over the stem. "Dad!" Nicole's voice was sharp. "You okay?" "Fine," I said quickly. "Just heartburn." Keith frowned. "Maybe you should take it easy on the wine." I nodded, forcing a smile. The flutter passed. I picked up the glass and took a careful sip. The ring glinted in the candlelight. Warm, solid, close to my heart. And somewhere deep in the back of my mind, a small voice whispered, "Something is wrong." But I didn't listen. The first week after my birthday, I barely noticed anything wrong. A little fatigue after long meetings. A heaviness in my chest I blamed on rich food and late nights. I was 72. Bodies slowed down. Angela noticed first. "Mr. Preston, you look pale," she said Thursday afternoon. "Just need more coffee." I waved her off, but by the second week, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The dizziness came during budget reviews. The tightness in my chest during conference calls. A pressure behind my sternum that felt like someone pressing their thumb into my ribs. Monday morning, I gripped my desk to steady myself. The room tilted, then righted itself. Tuesday, I had to sit down halfway through a site inspection. Nicole asked if I was all right. I lied and said I'd skipped breakfast. Wednesday, Angela cornered me. "Mr. Preston, you need to see a doctor." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're pale. You're sweating. And you keep touching your chest." I looked down. My hand was pressed flat against my sternum. I hadn't realized. "It's just stress," I said. "The waterfront project, Keith, everything. I'll slow down after we close the permits." She didn't look convinced. "At least take the afternoon off." I can't. Board meeting in 20 minutes." That meeting nearly killed me. We were discussing construction timelines for the waterfront project. Charles was presenting revised costs. Nicole was taking notes. I was trying to focus, but the pressure in my chest kept building. And then the pain hit. Sharp, blinding. Like a knife twisting between my ribs. I gasped, my hand flying to my chest. The room blurred. Voices turned to static. "Dad!" Nicole's voice cut through. "Dad, what's wrong?" I tried to answer, but my mouth wouldn't work. My vision narrowed. The chandelier swayed. "Someone call 911." Angela's voice high and panicked. "Now!" Hands on my shoulders. The world tilting. My knees buckling. I was falling. The last thing I saw was the ceiling white and impossibly far away. The last thing I thought was, I can't die now. Nicole needs me. Elizabeth. And then nothing. I woke to beeping. Steady, rhythmic, relentless. I forced my eyes open. Fluorescent lights, white walls, the sharp smell of disinfectant. Hospital. "Dad! Don't move!" Nicole. She was sitting beside the bed, her face pale and tear-streaked. Her hand gripped mine. "What happened?" My voice came out as a croak. "You collapsed. In the boardroom." I blinked, trying to piece together fragments. The meeting, the pain, the floor rushing up. "How long?" 3 hours. She wiped her eyes. "They brought you here. UW Medical Center." A doctor appeared at the foot of my bed. Young, efficient, wearing blue scrubs and a stethoscope. She checked the monitor, then looked at me with professional concern. Mr. Preston, you experienced a syncopal episode caused by cardiac arrhythmia. We're running tests. Your EKG showed irregularities consistent with your long QT syndrome. What kind of tests? We've started you on a 24-hour Holter monitor to track your heart rhythm. We'll also do an echocardiogram. For now, rest. I nodded, though the room still felt like it was spinning. Nicole squeezed my hand. Dad, you scared me. I'm okay. You're not okay. The door opened. Keith walked in. He looked calm, composed, but something flickered in his eyes. Dad, how are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. He managed a small smile. You gave everyone a scare. Keith's gaze dropped to my left hand, where the ring still sat on my finger, platinum gleaming. You're still wearing it. Of course. You told me to wear it all the time. Something crossed his face, too quick to read. Right. Good. Nicole stood. Keith, stay with him. I need to call Angela. She kissed my forehead and left. Keith pulled a chair closer. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Dad, he said finally. I'm sorry about everything, about being distant. I looked at him surprised. It's okay, son. I just want you to know I care. That ring, I meant it. I want you healthy. I want you around. His voice sounded sincere, but something underneath felt wrong. I know, I said. Thank you. He left a few minutes later. They wheeled me to the echocardiogram room an hour later. Nicole walked beside the gurney holding my hand. The technician applied cold gel to my chest and moved the ultrasound wand in slow circles. I watched my heart on the monitor pulsing like a fist. The whole time the ring pressed against my skin under the hospital blanket. Warm, almost hot. I touched it with my free hand, seeking comfort. Keith had given me this to help my heart. It had to help. They pushed me back down the hallway. Nicole walked beside the gurney, gripping my hand. I remember thinking how strange it was. Just 2 weeks ago, I'd felt fine, and now I was fighting for every heartbeat. The ring Keith gave me pressed into my skin beneath the thin blanket. I used my free hand to touch it, tracing the engraved letters with my thumb. My son had given me this to help my heart. It had to help. It had to. But when they pushed me into the imaging room and the machines began to whir, I felt that crushing pressure again, that tightness squeezing my chest. And I couldn't help but wonder if I'd ever walk out of this hospital alive. 3 days in the hospital felt like 3 weeks. They ran every test imaginable. Blood panels, EKGs, continuous Holter monitoring. The young ER doctor came by each morning with updates, her face professionally neutral as she reviewed charts. On the 3rd morning, she finally had answers. Mr. Preston, your results show prolonged QT intervals with episodes of ventricular arrhythmia. Given your long QT syndrome history, this puts you at significant risk for torsades de pointes, a potentially fatal heart rhythm disorder. I nodded, though the medical jargon washed over me. We've reviewed possible triggers: stress, certain medications, electrolyte imbalances, exposure to magnetic fields. We need to identify what caused this episode. Magnetic fields. The words hung in the air, but I didn't connect them to anything. Not yet. If you remain stable for 24 hours, we can discharge you tomorrow. She left. I stared at the ceiling, exhausted and confused. That afternoon, Patrick Reynolds walked into my room. Patrick was 70, retired from practice 5 years ago, but still sharp. We'd been friends for nearly 2 decades, sailing buddies bonded over charity galas and memories of the San Juans. He'd been my cardiologist before retirement, the one who diagnosed my long QT 20 years ago. Lawrence. He pulled up a chair, his face serious. Nicole called me, said you collapsed. Yeah, still trying to figure out why. He glanced at the monitors, then at me. His eyes stopped at my left hand. I'd put the ring back on that morning out of habit. Patrick's face went pale. Lawrence. His voice was tight. Where did you get that ring? I looked down at the platinum band. Keith gave it to me, for my birthday. It's supposed to help my heart. Biomagnetic resonance therapy. Patrick stood abruptly. Take it off. What? Take it off. Now. I stared at him confused. Patrick, what are you talking about? He grabbed my hand, urgent. Lawrence, you have long QT syndrome. You absolutely cannot wear magnetic devices, ever. But Keith said it was safe. He had it specially made. I don't care. Magnetic fields can trigger fatal arrhythmias in long QT patients. This is established medical fact. He pulled out his phone, opened an app, and held it near the ring. The screen flashed 198 Gauss. 200 Gauss. Patrick said, his voice shaking. That's dangerous for anyone with cardiac issues. For someone with long QT, it's a death sentence. I felt the blood drain from my face. Patrick's hands trembled as he helped me slide the ring off. Anyone who searches online for long QT and magnetic contraindications would know this. It's not obscure. It's basic cardiology. The ring sat on the bedside table, gleaming innocently. Keith researched this, I said slowly. He told me it was FDA approved. He showed me a certificate from Swiss Health Technologies. Patrick typed rapidly on his phone. After a moment, he looked up, his face grim. Swiss Health Technologies LLC doesn't exist. Not as a registered medical device company. Not anywhere. The room tilted. That's impossible. Keith wouldn't. Lawrence. Patrick's voice was gentle but firm. I'm not saying Keith did anything intentionally. Maybe he was scammed, but that ring almost killed you. I stared at the platinum band, the engraved initials, EPLP Elizabeth. My heart. Within an hour of removing the ring, something changed. The pressure in my chest, the tightness I'd lived with for 2 weeks, began to ease. Not completely, but enough that I could breathe without feeling crushed. The ER doctor came back that evening to review my EKG. Mr. Preston, your rhythm has stabilized significantly in the last few hours. Whatever was triggering the arrhythmias seems to have resolved. It was the ring, I said quietly. She glanced at Patrick, then at the ring. Understanding crossed her face. Magnetic field exposure, Patrick explained. Approximately 200 Gauss, worn continuously for 2 weeks. The doctor's expression shifted to shock. That would absolutely explain the symptoms. The next morning, they discharged me with strict instructions. No magnetic devices, no skipped medications, follow up in 1 week. Patrick drove me home. The ring sat in a plastic evidence bag in my coat pocket. Patrick had insisted I keep it. You might need this, he'd said, for documentation. Nicole met us at the house. She hugged me tightly, then pulled back her face, pale. Dad, Patrick told me about the ring. About what it did. I nodded, too tired to speak. Where did Keith get it? I don't know. Did he know about the long QT, about magnetic fields? I didn't answer. I couldn't. That night, I sat in my study, staring at the ring in its plastic bag on my desk. The engraved initials glinted in the lamplight. Patrick's words echoed in my mind. Anyone who searches online would know. Keith was smart, meticulous. He'd always been the researcher, the one who dug into every detail before making decisions. What if he had searched for it? What if my son had given me this gift, knowing exactly what it would do? I pushed the thought away. I had to, because accepting it meant accepting something no father should ever have to face. But the question remained dark and persistent, coiling around my heart. What if Keith knew? The first day home, I put the ring in the bottom drawer of my desk and shut it away. I couldn't look at it. Couldn't stand the way the platinum caught the light, the way those engraved initials seemed to mock me. E.P.L.P. Elizabeth and Lawrence. Love and death wrapped together in 200 gauss of magnetized metal. I tried to convince myself it was a mistake. Keith didn't know. He was trying to help. He'd been scammed by some fake medical device company. He could never intentionally hurt me. But Patrick's words kept circling back relentless as the rain against the windows. Anyone who searches online would know. Keith was vice president of operations. Smart, meticulous, detail-oriented to the point of obsession. Would he really spend $18,500 on a gift without researching it first? I told myself yes. I had to. But the doubt didn't go away. Nicole came by the second day carrying a container of chicken soup and a look I recognized too well. It was the same look Elizabeth used to give me when she knew I was lying to myself. "Dad, we need to talk about Keith." "I don't want to talk about Keith." "Too bad." She set the soup on the kitchen counter and pulled out her phone. "I've been doing research online." "Nicole, just listen." She held up the screen. "I searched for magnetic therapy contraindications and long QT. Want to know what came up?" I didn't answer. She turned the phone toward me. The first result was from the American Heart Association. The headline read, "Warning magnetic devices and cardiac arrhythmia patients." It's the first result, Dad. Literally the first thing. Anyone doing even basic research would find this in 30 seconds. I stared at the screen, my throat tight. Nicole scrolled down. More articles, more warnings. Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, Johns Hopkins. Every major medical institution saying the same thing: magnetic fields and long QT don't mix. "Keith emphasized wearing it 24/7, she said quietly. "He called you multiple times to check if you were wearing it." Remember, I did remember. 3 phone calls in the first week alone. "Still wearing the ring, Dad, good. Don't forget, it only works if you keep it on." He was being thoughtful, I said, but the words felt hollow. Or he was making sure you were exposed continuously. "Nicole, stop." "Dad." She put down her phone and looked at me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "What if it wasn't an accident? What if Keith gave you that ring knowing exactly what it would do? He's your brother. He's also deeply in debt. He's also angry about the promotion. He's also next in line to inherit if something happens to you." The words hit like a physical blow. "You don't know that." "I don't. That's why we need to find out." I stood up, my hands shaking. "I can't do this. I can't sit here and accuse my son of trying to kill me based on internet searches and suspicion." "Then let's get proof." Nicole stood too, her voice steady. "Let me hire a private investigator, someone discreet. If Keith is innocent, we'll know. If he's not..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I walked to the window, staring out at the gray Seattle sky. The rain had started again, steady and cold. "This feels like betrayal," I said quietly. "Protecting yourself isn't betrayal. He's my son. And you're my father. I almost lost you, Dad. I sat in that hospital not knowing if you'd wake up. I can't go through that again." I closed my eyes. I thought about Elizabeth. What would she say if she were here? I knew the answer. She'd tell me to stop being stubborn. She'd tell me to face the truth, no matter how painful. Protect yourself, Lawrence. Don't let love make you blind. That night I sat alone in my study holding the velvet box Keith had given me. The fabric was soft, expensive. Inside the ring gleamed beautiful and deadly. I thought about all the phone calls, the way Keith had smiled when I said I was wearing it, the insistence, 24/7 dad. For maximum effectiveness, I wanted to believe my son. I wanted to believe the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the teenager I'd helped through college applications, the man I'd groomed to take over the company someday. Could never plan something like this. But doubt is a poison that spreads. And my doubt had reached my heart. I picked up my phone and called Nicole. "Find someone," I said when she answered. "A professional investigator. I need to know the truth." There was a pause. Then quietly, "Okay, Dad, I will." I hung up and sat in the dark, the ring box heavy in my hands. Outside, the rain drummed against the windows, washing the city clean. But I felt dirtier than I'd ever felt in my life, because somewhere between that hospital bed and this moment, I'd crossed a line. I'd stopped being a father who trusted his son and become a man who suspected him of murder. And I didn't know if I could ever cross back. Nicole found him in 3 days. Stephen Cross, former FBI Cybercrime Division, licensed private investigator for the past decade specializing in digital forensics and corporate fraud. His office was in Pioneer Square, tucked into a renovated brick building that smelled like coffee and old wood. We met him on a Thursday morning early March. The rain had returned steady and cold. Stephen didn't look like the private investigators I'd seen in movies. No trench coat, no cigarette. He was maybe 50, lean and precise, wearing a gray suit and wire-rimmed glasses. His office was clean, professional, 2 desks, filing cabinets, a wall of framed certifications. "Mr. Preston?" He stood and shook my hand, his grip firm. "Ms. Preston, please sit." We sat. Nicole handed him a folder, medical records, the ring certificate, Patrick's notes. Stephen reviewed everything in silence, his expression neutral. After a few minutes, he looked up. "Tell me the story, everything, from the beginning." So I did. I told him about my 72nd birthday, the velvet box, the ring with Elizabeth's initials, Keith's insistence on wearing it 24/7, the biomagnetic resonance therapy claim, the collapse 2 weeks later, Dr. Reynolds's warning, the 200 Gauss reading, the fake Swiss company. Stephen took notes on a legal pad, his handwriting small and precise. When I finished, he asked questions. "Did Keith know about your long QT syndrome diagnosis?" "Yes, he was there when the doctor first explained it, 20 years ago." "Did the doctor explicitly mention magnetic field contraindications?" I nodded. "Very explicitly. It was one of the first things Patrick told me to avoid." Stephen made another note. "And Keith called you multiple times to confirm you were wearing the ring, 3 times in the first week. He emphasized it only worked if I kept it on constantly." "Did he seem concerned when you collapsed?" I hesitated. "He came to the hospital. He seemed calm, asked if I was still wearing the ring." Nicole leaned forward. "He didn't seem shocked. He seemed like he was checking something off a list." Stephen studied us both for a moment, then set down his pen. "Here's what I propose. A full investigation, 3 phases. First, digital forensics. I'll need access to Keith's search history, email accounts, online activity. If he researched this gift, there will be a trail. Second, financial audit. I'll look into debts, spending patterns, accounts. If there's a motive beyond anger, we'll find it. Third, if warranted, surveillance of his current activities." My stomach turned. This feels like spying on my own son. It is. Stephen said, his voice even. But if Keith is innocent, I'll prove it. If he's not, you need to protect yourself. Nicole touched my arm. Dad, we need to know. Stephen pulled out a contract. My retainer is $15,000. That covers 2 weeks of initial investigation. If we need to extend, we'll discuss rates then. I'll need the ring for analysis and sourcing, and I'll need written authorization to access certain records. I stared at the contract. My hand felt heavy as I signed it. One more thing, Stephen said. Don't contact Keith during the investigation. Don't tell him anything. If he's guilty, we can't let him know we're looking. What if he calls me, be normal, be brief, don't volunteer information? I nodded, though my throat felt tight. Nicole handed Stephen the ring in its plastic evidence bag. He held it up to the light, studying the emblem. I'll have this analyzed. Field strength composition, manufacturer traces. If it was custom made, someone built it. We'll find them. How long? I asked. 2 weeks for preliminary findings. Sooner if I find something critical. We stood. Stephen shook my hand again. Mr. Preston, I've worked a lot of cases like this. Family betrayal is the hardest kind to prove, but it's also the hardest kind to hide. If Keith did this, he left a trail. We'll find it. We left the office and stepped out into the rain. Nicole held an umbrella over both of us as we walked toward the car. My phone buzzed. Keith's name on the screen. I stared at it. Stephen had just said, don't contact him, be brief, but I answered anyway. Keith. His voice was casual, almost cheerful. Hey, Dad. Haven't heard from you in a while. Want to grab dinner? My throat tightened. This week's pretty busy, son. I'll call you soon. A pause. Then carefully. Everything okay? No, I thought. Nothing is okay. But I said, fine, just tired. I'll talk to you soon. I hung up. Nicole looked at me, her face pale. Do you think he knows something's wrong? I thought about Keith's intelligence, his calculating nature, the way he'd asked that last question, careful probing, like he was testing me. Maybe, I said. We need Stephen to work fast. We got in the car. The rain drummed on the roof. I looked back at Stephen's office at the light in the window and felt a strange mix of hope and dread. Somewhere in Keith's digital history, in his bank accounts, in the trail he'd left behind, was the truth. And I wasn't sure I was ready to find it. 10 days later, my phone rang. Stephen's voice was tight. I found something. You need to come to my office today. Nicole drove. I sat in the passenger seat, my hands clenched in my lap, watching the rain streak down the windshield. I didn't know what Stephen had found, but the tone of his voice told me it wasn't good. We arrived at Pioneer Square just after 2. Stephen met us at the door, his face grim. This is hard evidence, he said, leading us inside. And it's not good. He'd set up a projector. The screen on the wall showed a desktop display, folders, timestamps, search entries. Before we start, Stephen said, I want you to be clear on how I obtained this. When you signed the authorization form last week, you gave me legal access to Keith's work computer and company email as chairman of Preston Properties. Under Washington state employment law, employers have the right to monitor and access company devices. Everything you're about to see came from Keith's work laptop and corporate email account. It's completely legal. I nodded, though my throat felt tight. I'd signed that form without fully understanding what it meant. Now I was about to see my son's secrets laid bare. Stephen clicked the first file. Internet search history from Keith's work computer. January 20th through 28th, 2026. My breath caught. Those dates were before my birthday. The screen filled with search entries, time-stamped and dated. January 20th, 11:47 p.m., long QT syndrome life expectancy. January 21, 8:32 a.m., sudden cardiac death, long QT statistics. January 22, 10:15 p.m., magnetic fields, cardiac arrhythmia. January 23, 6:41 a.m., magnetic therapy contraindications. January 24, 28, 8 p.m., how strong magnetic field trigger arrhythmia. January 26, 7:19 p.m., magnetic jewelry, dangerous cardiac patients. January 27th, 11:03 p.m., platinum ring, magnetic core. January 28, 8:54 a.m., how to speed up inheritance. The room tilted. Nicole made a sound, half sob, half gasp. Stephen's voice was steady, professional. Keith researched exactly how to harm someone with long QT syndrome. Then he researched how to profit from it. All of this was done on his work computer during work hours and after hours while logged into the company network. I couldn't speak. I just stared at the screen at the clinical precision of my son's planning. Stephen clicked to the next file. Email correspondence from Keith's company account. January 29th, sent to an anonymous account, Custom Metal Works, Anonymail, DCH. The email appeared on screen. From K. Preston, Operations, Preston Properties. Com to Custom Metal Works, Anonymail. CH date January 29, 2026, 10:42 p.m. Subject custom ring order. Need platinum ring size 10 embedded magnetic core, minimum 200 Gauss. For therapeutic purposes, make it look like normal jewelry. How much? The reply came 2 hours later. From Custom Metal Works, Anonymail.ch to K. Preston, Operations, Preston Properties. Com date January 30, 2026, 12:17 a.m. Subject re-custom ring order 200 Gauss is industrial grade. You sure? $300 plus 50 shipping, Bitcoin only. Keith's response was immediate. From K. Preston, Operations, prestonproperties.com. To Custom Metal Works, Anonymail.ch date January 30, 2026, 12:22 a.m. Subject. Re-custom ring order, I'm sure. Send Bitcoin wallet address. Stephen paused the screen. He told you $18,500 from a Swiss company. He actually paid $350 to an anonymous seller. Nicole was crying. Silent, shaking tears. Stephen clicked again. The certificate. We found the Photoshop file on Keith's work laptop. The screen showed a layered image file, Dad Ring Certificate Final. PSD layers labeled logo, Swiss Health Tech signature, fake stamp, custom text body. He made it himself, Stephen said quietly. The whole thing, the company, the certificate, the medical claims, all fabricated. I stood up. My legs felt weak, but I needed to move. I walked to the window, staring out at the rain, at the people on the street going about their normal lives. My son had researched how to kill me. Methodically, deliberately. With the same precision he brought to construction budgets and project timelines. He'd found the weapon, commissioned it, wrapped it in sentiment, made sure I wore it 24/7. And when I collapsed, he'd come to the hospital to check if I was still wearing it. I felt Nicole's hand on my shoulder. Dad. I shook my head. I couldn't look at her. If I looked at her, I'd fall apart. I need a minute, I said, my voice breaking. I walked out of the office, down the stairs onto the street. The rain hit my face cold and sharp. I stood on the sidewalk, gasping for air, my chest tight. Nicole followed. She wrapped her arms around me, and I broke. I cried for the first time since Elizabeth died. Not from physical pain, but from betrayal so profound it felt like a wound that would never heal. My son had planned this, researched it, executed it. The boy I'd taught to throw a baseball, the teenager I'd helped through calculus homework, the man I'd trusted with my company. He'd tried to kill me. Nicole held me while I shook. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. When I finally stopped, when I could breathe again, we went back inside. Stephen was waiting. His face was sympathetic but serious. There's more, he said. I looked at him empty. More. He nodded. The financial records. They explain why Keith was desperate enough to do this. He gestured to a man I hadn't noticed before gray suit wire-rimmed glasses, a briefcase open on the desk. This is Dr. Michael Shaw, forensic accountant. He's been working parallel to my digital investigation. And what he found... Stephen paused, choosing his words carefully. Dr. Shaw stood pulling out thick folders of spreadsheets and bank statements. Mr. Preston, he said gently, your son is drowning in debt. Dr. Shaw spread the financial documents across the table like a coroner, laying out evidence at an autopsy. I've audited Keith's finances for the past 3 years, he said, his voice clinical. The picture is catastrophic. He pulled out the first folder, thick with bank statements and credit card bills. Casino debt. $4.3 million. The number hit me like a punch. Nicole gasped. 4 million. Shaw nodded. Accumulated over 2 years. Las Vegas, Atlantic City, tribal casinos here in Washington. He used personal accounts and credit cards to hide it from you? The debt collectors have been escalating. This is from last week. He slid a printed text message across the table. From unknown number to Keith Preston, date March 8, 2026, deadline June 1st. 4.3 members, no extensions. You know what happens if you don't pay. The implied violence made my stomach turn. How did I not know? I said, my voice hollow. $4 million. He was careful, Shaw said. Separate accounts, cash transactions, offshore transfers. He didn't want you to find out until it was too late. Shaw pulled out another folder, this one stamped with the Preston Foundation logo. Embezzlement. $1.2 million. Nicole's hand flew to her mouth. Shaw continued, methodical. Keith has been stealing from the Preston Foundation since September 2025. Your wife's charity fund. Elizabeth's fund. The one she'd set up to help Seattle families afford housing. The one Keith had volunteered to oversee after her death. How? I asked. Fake vendors. Inflated invoices. Cash withdrawals disguised as program expenses. He used his access as vice president of operations to authorize payments without secondary approval. The money went into shell accounts then to his personal use, mostly to pay down gambling debt. Shaw handed me a spreadsheet. Columns of numbers, dates, amounts, all totaling $1.2 million stolen from my wife's legacy. The annual audit is scheduled for July 2026, Shaw said quietly. If you'd lived until July, Keith would have been caught. Prosecuted. Prison time minimum 10 years for embezzlement of this scale. The room spun. So he needed me dead, I said slowly. Before June 1st. Before the audit. Shaw nodded. Exactly. He pulled out the final document, my will marked up with calculations. Current estate distribution. Keith receives 60%, $348 million. Nicole receives 30%, $174 million. Charity receives 10%, $58 million. He circled Keith's share in red. If you die before June, Keith inherits $348 million. He pays off the casino debt, $4.3 million. He covers the embezzlement, $1.2 million. He still has $342.5 million left. Shaw looked at me, his eyes sympathetic, but unflinching. As executor of your estate, Keith would control the timeline. He could delay the foundation audit indefinitely, erase the evidence. By the time anyone questioned it, the money would be untraceable. Nicole's voice was shaking. He needed Dad dead to survive. Not just financially, Shaw said. Legally, if the embezzlement is discovered, Keith faces criminal charges, prison, financial ruin. But if your father dies before the audit, Keith controls everything. He inherits, he pays his debts, he covers his tracks. He walks away clean. I stared at the numbers on the table. 4.3 million. 1.2 million. 348 million. My life calculated down to the dollar. The timeline is precise, Shaw continued. Casino deadline June 1st. That's less than 3 months from now. Foundation audit July. The ring was given February 14th. 2 weeks later, you collapsed. If you died in that hospital, Keith would have had 4 months to settle his debts and erase evidence before anyone asked questions. I felt sick. He stole from Elizabeth's fund, I said, my voice breaking. From her charity, the thing she cared about most. Shaw nodded. And when he got caught in his own web, he chose to kill you rather than face the consequences. The room was silent except for the rain against the windows. Nicole was crying again. Stephen stood near the door, his face grim. I looked at the spreadsheets, at the cold mathematics of my son's desperation, and felt something die inside me. Not hope. Hope had died when I saw those search histories. This was deeper. This was the death of the father I used to be. The man who believed blood meant loyalty. The man who thought he'd raised his children right. Dad. Nicole's voice cut through the fog. There's one more thing. I looked at Stephen. He nodded, his expression serious. We need audio evidence for court, Stephen said. Jake Peterson, Keith's college friend, agreed to cooperate. We recorded a conversation. My hands clenched. When? Last Friday, at the Tin Room Bar in Belltown. Keith was drunk, and he talked. Stephen pulled out a small digital recorder and set it on the table. This is hard to hear, he warned, but you need to know what your son said when he thought no one was listening. He pressed play. Static, bar noise, glasses clinking. Then Keith's voice slurred but unmistakable. You don't understand, Jake. I didn't have a choice. The old man was going to find out. The audit's in July. I'd go to prison. So I gave him the ring. Simple, clean. 2 weeks he'd be gone and I'd be free. Jake's voice quieter. Jesus, Keith, that's your dad. Keith laughed. A cold, bitter sound. My dad's 72. He's had a good life. Me, I'm 48 and drowning. The ring was mercy, really. Quick. Painless. Better than what the casino guys would do to me. The recording stopped. The silence in Stephen's office was absolute. I stared at the recorder, unable to move, unable to breathe. My son's voice. Casual. Calculating. Talking about my death like it was a business decision. The ring was mercy. Nicole was sobbing. Stephen looked away. I stood up, my legs shaking, and walked to the window. Outside, Seattle moved on. Rain, traffic, people living their ordinary lives. Inside, I was drowning. What do I do now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Stephen's answer was quiet but firm. Now, Mr. Preston, you decide if you want to press charges. 3 days after the financial meeting, Stephen called again. We're ready for the surveillance. Jake agreed to wear a wire. Friday night. The Tin Room in Belltown. Keith goes there every week after work. I want to be there, I said. Stephen hesitated. Mr. Preston, you don't have to. I need to hear it myself. Friday evening, Nicole and I sat in Stephen's surveillance van, parked half a block from the tin room. The equipment filled the back monitors, recording devices, headphones. Stephen handed us each a pair. "Jake's already inside," he said. "Keith just walked in. They're at the bar." I put on the headphones. Static. Bar noise. Then Jake's voice, nervous but steady. "Jake, hey man, you look stressed. What's going on?" "Keith, it's my old man. He's still alive." My chest tightened. "Jake." "What, Keith? What do you mean?" A pause. The clink of glasses. Keith ordering another whiskey. "Keith, the old bastard should have been dead by now." Nicole grabbed my hand. "Jake." "Keith, you're not making sense." "Keith, that ring. The Swiss magnetic therapy bullshit. 200 Gauss. His long QT should have triggered cardiac arrest." I calculated it. 3 weeks max. "Jake, Jesus Christ, Keith. Are you saying..." "Keith." "I'm saying I gave the old man a gift that was supposed to finish him, but his retired doctor friend figured it out, made him take the ring off." A bitter laugh. "Keith." "Now he's fine, and I'm screwed." Silence on the recording. Then Jake's voice, horrified. "Jake, you tried to kill your father, my Keith." "I tried to solve a problem. There's a difference." I felt like I was drowning. Nicole was crying silently beside me. The recording continued. "Keith, I need $4 million by June 1st. I need to cover the 1.2 from the foundation. The only way out is Dad's will, 60%. 348 million. Jake. You're going to kill your father for an inheritance." "Keith, what choice do I have? Bellevue Commons failed. Dad chose Nicole over me. The casino guys are threatening my life. He's 72. He has long QT. He could die anytime anyway. I'm just speeding up the process." "Jake, that's murder." "Keith, that's survival." Another pause. The sound of Keith draining his glass. "Keith, you know what the kicker is? I did everything right. The searches were on my work computer. Figured if anyone found them, I'd say I was researching for a company health initiative. The ring was custom-made, untraceable. The certificate looked perfect. I even timed it for 2 weeks before the casino deadline and 4 months before the foundation audit." "Jake, this is insane." "Keith, this is chess. And I was winning until that old doctor bastard interfered." "Jake, I can't know this. I have to tell someone." The sound of a chair scraping. Keith's voice turned cold. "Keith, you're not telling anyone." "Jake." "Keith. Keith. Listen to me. If Dad finds out, I'll drag you down with me. You've got your own secrets, Jake. That DUI you covered up. The tax evasion. I know everything. You talk, I talk. We both go down. Jake, you're threatening me." "Keith. I'm protecting myself, like I've been doing this whole time." The sound of footsteps. A door opening. Jake leaving. The recording went silent. Stephen removed his headphones. Jake came to me 2 days later, scared and guilty. He agreed to testify. I sat in the van, unable to move, unable to breathe. Nicole was sobbing into her hands. I pulled off my headphones, but Keith's voice still echoed in my skull. "The old bastard should have been dead by now. I'm just speeding up the process. That's survival." My son had researched how to kill me, commissioned the weapon, calculated the timeline, and when I didn't die fast enough, he'd complained about it over drinks, like I was a failed business deal. "Mr. Preston." Stephen's voice was gentle. "This is enough for criminal charges. Attempted murder, reckless endangerment, embezzlement, witness intimidation. But you'll need a lawyer. A really good one. I looked at Nicole through my tears. Her face was set determined, despite the pain in her eyes. Judith Coleman, she said. She's handled our family's legal matters for 20 years. If anyone can build this case, it's her. I heard my own voice, distant and hollow. Set up a meeting. Tomorrow. Because I'd made my decision. Keith had tried to kill me. He'd stolen from Elizabeth's charity. He'd threatened a witness. And he'd done it all with the cold calculation of a man who saw his father's life as nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. I thought about the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the teenager who'd helped me renovate our first rental property, the man I'd groomed to take over the company someday. That boy was gone. Maybe he'd never existed. What remained was a stranger who'd looked at my 72-year-old life and decided it was worth less than his gambling debts. Stephen started the van. I'll send you the full recording and transcript tomorrow, along with all the evidence we've gathered. Digital forensics, financial records, the ring analysis, everything Judith will need. Thank you, I managed. Nicole held my hand as we drove through the rainy Seattle streets. Neither of us spoke. When we arrived at my house, she helped me inside, made me tea, sat with me in the study while I stared at nothing. Dad, she finally said, I know this is the hardest thing you've ever had to do, but Keith made his choice. He chose to hurt you. Now you have to choose to protect yourself. I nodded, though everything inside me felt broken. Tomorrow, I said. We'll meet with Judith. We'll start the process. Nicole kissed my forehead. I'll be with you every step. After she left, I sat alone in the dark, holding the velvet box that had contained the ring. Empty now, harmless. But the damage was done. My son had tried to kill me, and I was going to make sure he answered for it. Even if it destroyed what was left of our family. Even if it destroyed what was left of me. If you've stayed with me through this painful revelation, drop a 1 in the comments below. It helps me know this story is reaching you. A quick reminder: what follows contains dramatized elements crafted for reflection and learning. If this narrative doesn't resonate with you, feel free to step away now and find content that better suits your needs. Judith Coleman's office was in downtown Seattle, 40th floor to ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. I'd been here dozens of times over the past 20 years, estate planning, contract reviews, corporate acquisitions. Never for this. Judith was 60 sharp as a blade with silver hair and the kind of calm that came from decades in courtrooms. She'd handled Elizabeth's will, Nicole's trust fund, the Preston Properties Incorporation documents. Now she was going to help me prosecute my son. We sat around her conference table, me, Nicole, Stephen. Judith listened to the audio recording in silence, her face professional but tight. When it ended, she reviewed the evidence Stephen had compiled: search histories, emails, financial records, the ring analysis. She set down her reading glasses and looked at me. This is ironclad. Attempted murder, embezzlement, witness intimidation. Lawrence, if you pursue this, Keith will go to prison. The words hung in the air like smoke. What are my options? I asked. Judith pulled out a legal pad, writing as she spoke. Option 1, criminal charges. We're looking at attempted murder or reckless endangerment, Class A felony, up to life in prison. Embezzlement, over $1.2 million, Class B felony, up to 10 years. Witness intimidation, Class C felony, up to 5 years. Charges would be filed with the King County Prosecutor's Office. Keith would be arrested, arraigned, likely held on bail, given flight risk and severity. Trial would be public. Media coverage inevitable given Preston Properties' profile. She looked up. Pros: Keith is incarcerated, can't harm you again, justice is served. Khan's public scandal family destroyed trial will be traumatic. Nicole's hand found mine under the table. Option 2. Judith continued. Civil settlement. We negotiate with Keith's attorney. He repays the embezzlement, resigns from Preston Properties, agrees to stay away from you. No prison time. We keep the evidence as leverage. Pros: more private, faster resolution. Cons: Keith remains free, could attempt harm again, no real consequences, for attempted murder. Option 3, do nothing. Change your will, cut Keith off, maintain distance. Keep the evidence as insurance. Pros: no litigation. Cons: Keith faces no punishment. Embezzlement goes unreported, he could escalate. I stared at the legal pad. 3 choices, all of them devastating. What do you recommend? I asked. Judith's voice was gentle but firm. Personally, criminal charges. He tried to kill you, Lawrence. This wasn't a moment of passion or an accident. He researched it, planned it, executed it. And when it didn't work, he threatened a witness. This is premeditated attempted murder. Nicole nodded. He has to face consequences. He's my son, I said, my voice breaking. He stopped being your son when he searched online for how to speed up inheritance. Judith said quietly. Lawrence, I've known you 20 years. I knew Elizabeth. She taught you that consequences matter. That's why you built a company on integrity. Keith betrayed that. He betrayed you. I closed my eyes. Elizabeth's voice in my memory. Do what's right, even when it's hard. File criminal charges, I said. All of them. Judith nodded, making notes. I'll contact the King County prosecutor today. They'll review the evidence and file formal charges within 72 hours. Once filed, an arrest warrant will be issued. How long until he's arrested? Could be as soon as tomorrow morning. My chest tightened. Stephen leaned forward. Mr. Preston, until Keith is in custody, you're still at risk. He doesn't know we have this evidence yet. If he finds out, he could flee or escalate. Judith pulled out a small device, a panic button on a keychain. Wear this at all times. If Keith approaches you, if you feel threatened, press it. It alerts 911 and sends your GPS location to police and to Stephen's team. She handed me a second document. Safety protocol. Don't be alone with Keith. Don't answer his calls. Change your locks. Stephen will assign protective surveillance until Keith is in custody. I took the panic button. It felt heavier than it should. What happens after the arrest? Nicole asked. Arraignment within 48 hours, Judith said. Keith will be read the charges, enter a plea. Given the severity and his financial resources, prosecution will argue he's a flight risk. Bail will be high, possibly denied. Then we prepare for trial. How long? 6 to 8 months typically. But this case is strong. Keith's attorney may advise him to plead guilty for a reduced sentence. I couldn't imagine it. My son in an orange jumpsuit, in a courtroom, in a cell. But I also couldn't forget his voice on that recording. The old bastard should have been dead by now. We left Judith's office just after 4. The rain had started again, heavy and cold. My phone rang, Keith's name on the screen. Judith touched my arm. Don't answer. But I looked at that name, the son I'd named after Elizabeth's father, the baby I'd held 30 seconds after he was born, and felt something harden inside me. I answered. Keith. His voice was cheerful. Dad, haven't heard from you in a while. Want to grab dinner? I closed my eyes. No, Keith. I don't think that's a good idea. Silence. Then carefully. Is something wrong? Everything I thought. Everything is wrong. But I said, I need some space. I'll call you when I'm ready. I hung up before he could respond. 3 days later, Judith called. The prosecutor filed formal charges. The arrest warrant for Keith is being issued now. My hands shook. When? Could be as early as tomorrow morning. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my study staring at a photo of Keith at age 10, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a fish we'd caught together on Lake Washington. At dawn, police would knock on my son's door, and nothing would ever be the same. I woke at 5, though I hadn't really slept. I sat in the kitchen watching the clock. 5:15, 5:30, 5:45. At 6:17, my phone rang. Nicole. They got him, Dad. He's in custody. Relief and devastation hit me in the same breath. Tell me what happened. Her voice was shaking. Stephen and I were parked across the street from Keith's condo downtown. 2 squad cars pulled up at 6:02, 4 officers. They knocked. Keith answered in his pajamas, looking confused. I could picture it. My son, barefoot, half awake, opening the door to police. They said, Keith Preston, you're under arrest for attempted murder and embezzlement. They read him his Miranda rights. He kept saying, my father, you need to call my father, he'll explain. So, like you could make this go away. My throat tightened. They cuffed him. Nicole continued. He saw me across the street, started screaming. Nicole, what did you do? Did you poison Dad against me? What did you say? I yelled back, you did this to yourself. Silence on the line. Then Nicole's voice quieter. He looked at me, Dad, like I'd betrayed him, like he was the victim. They put him in the squad car, and he was still screaming. You'll regret this, both of you. Neighbors everywhere. Phones out filming. The Preston family scandal is public now. I closed my eyes. 20 years of building a reputation, gone in one morning. By 9 o'clock, the media storm hit. Seattle Times headline: Preston Properties heir arrested in alleged plot to murder father. Cuero 7 breaking news. Shocking arrest in wealthy Seattle family son accused of attempted murder for inheritance. Reporters camped outside my house. Vans with satellite dishes. Cameras pointed at my windows. Angela fielded calls. I issued a brief statement through Judith. This is a family matter being handled through appropriate legal channels. We ask for privacy during this difficult time. Privacy. As if that word meant anything anymore. At 2 o'clock, Judith called about the bail hearing. It's scheduled for 4. King County Superior Court. Judge Margaret Thornton presiding. Do you want to attend? No. I couldn't. Seeing Keith in handcuffs in a courtroom jumpsuit would break what was left of me. I'll call you after. At 5:30, my phone rang again. The hearing's over, Judith said. Keith's attorney, Robert Mitchell, argued no flight risk, strong community ties presumption of innocence. Prosecutor James Harrington countered that Keith attempted to murder his own father and is desperate with $4.3 million in debts to dangerous people. Judge set bail at $2 million cash. Can he pay it? No. His accounts are frozen pending the embezzlement investigation. He'll remain in King County Jail until trial. My son, in jail. How long until trial? 6 to 8 months. Prosecutor's office is moving fast given the evidence. They want this resolved before media attention fades. After we hung up, I sat in the dark study staring at nothing. At 7:42, my phone rang again. Unknown number, King County Jail, automated voice. You have a collect call from an inmate at King County Jail. This call will be recorded. Press 1 to accept. Press 2 to decline. Keith. My hand hovered over the screen. I thought about the boy I'd taught to ride a bike. The teenager who'd helped me fix the deck. The man who'd stood beside me at Elizabeth's funeral. Then I thought about his voice on that recording. The old bastard should have been dead by now. I pressed 2. Your call has been declined. Somewhere in a cell downtown, my son would hear that automated message, and he would understand finally what he'd destroyed. Not just my trust, not just our family, but any chance of redemption. I set the phone down and looked around the study. Photos everywhere. Keith at 5 Gap, toothed and grinning. Keith graduating college, proud in his cap and gown. Keith's first day at Preston Properties, shaking my hand in front of the company logo. The boy in those photos, smiling innocent, full of promise. Where had he gone? When had my son become someone who could search online for undetectable cardiac arrest while planning his father's birthday gift? I would never know. All I knew was this: the arrest was just the beginning. Now came the hard part, facing Keith in court and telling the world what he'd done. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing with texts. Angela, media at the gate. 30 reporters minimum. Nicole, Dad, are you okay? I can come over. Stephen, surveillance confirms Keith is in custody. You're safe now. Judith, preliminary hearing set for April 21st. We need to prep your testimony. I stood at the window, looking out at the rain, at the reporters huddled under umbrellas, at the life I'd built, now exposed and dissected for public consumption. Keith was in jail. The trial was coming. And nothing would ever be the same. I thought about Elizabeth. What would she say if she were here? I knew the answer. She'd tell me to be strong, to see this through, to remember that consequences matter even when they hurt. Especially when they hurt. I picked up my phone and called Judith. I'm ready, I said. Let's prepare for trial. Because Keith had made his choice when he researched how to kill me. Now I was making mine. Justice, no matter the cost. Trial date October 15th. 7 months to prepare. 7 months to suffer. The meeting started immediately. Judith's office, then James Harrington's office downtown, then conference rooms with whiteboards covered in timelines and evidence markers. I spent more time in those sterile rooms than in my own home. You're the key witness, Judith told me in late April. The jury needs to see you as a father who was betrayed, not a vindictive parent. Harrington was blunt. The defense will paint Keith as a devoted son and you as a cold father who drove him to desperation. We counter with facts. The ring, the searches, the recording. Let the evidence speak. They drilled me relentlessly. Mock cross-examinations where Judith played hostile defense attorney. Isn't it true you favored Nicole? Didn't you humiliate Keith at the board meeting? Could this be revenge? 8 hours of practice interrogation left me exhausted, questioning my own memories. By June, Robert Mitchell, Keith's defense attorney, deposed me. 8 hours in a windowless room, a court reporter typing every word, Mitchell pacing like a predator. Mr. Preston, isn't it possible Keith genuinely believed the ring would help your heart? No. The evidence shows. I'm asking what's possible, not what you believe. He researched magnetic contraindications specifically for long QT patients. Or he researched therapy benefits and made an honest mistake. A son trying to help his aging father. On and on, twisting my words, suggesting alternative explanations. By hour 6, I wanted to scream, but I answered truthfully. Let Mitchell spin his theories. The evidence would bury them. Keith remained in jail through summer. No one posted his $2 million bail. He refused family visits, but sent letters. 3 to me, 2 to Nicole. Dad, please, drop the charges. I'm your son. And to Nicole, you poisoned Dad against me. When I get out, you'll regret this. Judith added them to the evidence file. More proof of intimidation. By July, I'd lost 15 pounds. Patrick Reynolds insisted I see someone. Dr. Maria Santos, a trauma specialist, met with me twice a week. "You're grieving," she said during our second session. "Not just for what Keith did, but for the son you thought you had." The nightmares started in August. The ring tightening around my finger, cutting off circulation, my heart stuttering. Keith's face whispering, "The old bastard should have been dead by now." I'd wake at 3 a.m. gasping, the phantom pressure still tight around my finger. Patrick checked my long QT regularly. "Your rhythm's stable, Lawrence, but stress is a trigger. Take care of yourself." Friends rallied. Patrick took me sailing. Charles Bennett stopped by with whiskey. Angela screened my calls, handled the press. Nicole came 3 times a week with groceries, sat with me when silence got too heavy. "We're doing the right thing," she'd say. "Mom would be proud." I wanted to believe her. Preston Properties took a hit initially. Stock dipped 12% after Keith's arrest. But Nicole stepped up as acting COO, handled press conferences with grace. My Preston Properties was built on integrity. Our projects continue on schedule. Our values remain unchanged. By September, stock recovered. The waterfront project broke ground on time. October 5th, 10 days before trial. Final strategy meeting with Judith and Harrington. "Our witness list," Harrington said. "Lawrence Preston, Nicole Preston, Dr. Patrick Reynolds for medical testimony, Stephen Cross for digital forensics, Dr. Michael Shaw for financial motive, Jake Peterson for the confession." "Defense witnesses?" I asked. Minimal," Judith said. "Robert Mitchell will call character witnesses, people who'll say Keith was a good son. He'll try to create reasonable doubt. But the evidence is overwhelming." "Will Keith testify?" "Mitchell's decision," Harrington said. "If Keith takes the stand, I can cross-examine him on everything. Most attorneys would never risk it." "But Keith's arrogant," Judith added. "He might think he can talk his way out." Harrington's smile was cold. "If he testifies, I'll destroy him." October 14th. The night before trial, I couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m, I stood in Keith's old bedroom. His high school trophies lined dusty shelves. His college diploma hung crooked on the wall. I picked up a framed photo. Keith at 10, gap-toothed grin, arm around my shoulders at a Mariners game. I remembered that day clearly. Hot dog with everything, teaching him to score the game. His laughter when Felix Hernandez struck out the side. That boy, that happy, innocent boy, where had he gone? When had he become someone who could search online for how to speed up inheritance? I set the photo down and left the room, closing the door softly. Tomorrow I would walk into King County Superior Court and tell 12 strangers what my son had done. Tomorrow I would help send him to prison, and the boy in that photo would become nothing but a memory. October 15th. The day I'd been dreading for 7 months. The morning was cold autumn rain drumming against the windows of my Queen Anne house. Nicole drove. I sat in the passenger seat, hands clenched, watching Seattle slide past through rain-streaked glass. By the time we reached the King County Superior Court, media vans lined the street like vultures. Judith met us at the side entrance, guiding us past cameras and shouted questions. Inside the courthouse smelled like old wood and tension. Our footsteps echoed down marble hallways until we reached courtroom 3C. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Wood-paneled walls, high ceilings, rows of benches for spectators already filling with reporters and curious onlookers. At the front, the judge's bench loomed like an altar. To the left, the jury box sat empty waiting. And at the defense table, Keith. He wore a clean navy suit, white shirt, no tie. His hair was shorter than I remembered, face gaunt from 7 months in jail. He looked older, harder. When we entered, his eyes found mine across the room. For 3 seconds, we stared at each other. Then he looked away. Nicole squeezed my hand. "You okay?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure it was true. "All rise." Judge Margaret Thornton entered, black robes flowing 60-something with silver hair and sharp eyes. She'd been on the bench for 15 years, Judith had told me. Fair but stern, no tolerance for theatrics. The jury filed in next. 12 people, ages ranging from mid-20s to early 70s. 6 men, 6 women, 2 alternates. These strangers would decide my son's fate. I studied their faces, wondering what they saw when they looked at Keith. A monster, a victim, a man who'd made a terrible mistake. Judge Thornton's voice cut through my thoughts. The state of Washington versus Keith Allen Preston. Opening statements. Mr. Harrington, you may proceed. James Harrington stood, mid-40s tall, with the kind of confidence that came from winning most of his cases. He buttoned his suit jacket and approached the jury box. "Good morning. This is a case about greed, betrayal, and murder disguised as love." His voice was measured, clear, filling the courtroom without effort. Lawrence Preston built a company worth $580 million through integrity and hard work. He has a medical condition called long QT syndrome, a heart rhythm disorder that makes him vulnerable to certain triggers. His son Keith knew this. Keith was there 20 years ago when doctors first diagnosed his father and explained in detail what could kill him. Harrington paused, letting that sink in. Keith Preston is deeply in debt. $4.3 million owed to casino loan sharks, with a deadline of June 1st. $1.2 million embezzled from his late mother's charity, with an audit scheduled for July that would expose his crimes and send him to prison. He walked along the jury box, making eye contact with each juror. Keith needed money, desperately, and his father's will left him 60% of the estate, $348 million. All Keith needed was for his father to die. So he researched. He searched online for long QT life expectancy, for sudden cardiac death statistics, for how magnetic fields trigger fatal arrhythmias in long QT patients. Harrington picked up a tablet displaying the search history on screens mounted throughout the courtroom. The timestamps glowed January 20th through 28th, before my birthday. Then Keith commissioned a weapon. A platinum ring with a 200 Gauss magnetic core, industrial strength, deadly to someone with long QT. He lied about the price, telling his father it cost $18,500 from a Swiss medical company. The truth: $350 from an anonymous seller. He faked the medical certificate himself in Photoshop. My throat tightened. Seeing it laid out like this, clinical and precise, made it real all over again. Keith gave his father this ring as a birthday gift, engraved with his late mother's initials to make it sentimental. Insisted his father wear it 24/7 for maximum effectiveness. Called repeatedly to make sure the ring stayed on. 2 weeks later, Lawrence Preston collapsed during a board meeting. He nearly died. Only the intervention of his longtime cardiologist saved his life. Harrington turned to face Keith directly. Keith Preston valued his father's life at $348 million. That's the price he put on murder. And when it didn't work, when his father survived, Keith told a friend, and I quote, "The old bastard should have been dead by now." We have that confession on tape. He returned to the jury. This isn't a case about a loving son making a mistake. This is premeditated, attempted murder for financial gain, and the evidence will prove it beyond any reasonable doubt. Harrington sat down. The courtroom was silent. Judge Thornton looked to the defense table. "Mr. Mitchell." Robert Mitchell stood, 50s gray at the temples, expensive suit. He smiled at the jury like they were old friends. You've heard Mr. Harrington's story. Now let me tell you the truth. His voice was warm, conversational. Keith Preston loves his father. He's made mistakes, he'll be the first to admit that. He gambled. He borrowed money he shouldn't have. He made poor financial decisions under stress. But attempted murder, ladies and gentlemen, that's not what happened here. Mitchell walked to the jury box. Keith researched alternative therapies because he was worried about his father's health. He wanted to help. Did he make a mistake buying that ring? Possibly. Was it a tragic error? Absolutely. But criminal intent to murder? No. He gestured to the evidence screens. Those internet searches the prosecution showed you a son researching his father's condition, looking for ways to extend his life. The ring bought from what Keith believed was a legitimate medical device company. Yes, he was wrong. But being wrong isn't the same as being a murderer. Mitchell's voice dropped intimate, and that recording. Keith was drunk, angry, venting to a friend after months of family conflict. Have you ever said something you didn't mean when you were hurt and intoxicated? Words taken out of context, twisted to sound sinister. He shook his head sadly. If Keith really wanted to kill his father, would he leave such an obvious trail, online searches on his work computer, emails from his company account? That's not the behavior of a calculating murderer. That's the behavior of a desperate son trying to help and making tragic mistakes along the way. Mitchell returned to his seat. This case is about a family torn apart by misunderstanding and grief, not murder. And when you've heard all the evidence, you'll see that Keith Preston is guilty of many things, but attempted murder is not one of them. Judge Thornton called for lunch recess. As we filed out, I passed within 3 feet of Keith. Close enough to see the stubble on his jaw, the dark circles under his eyes. Close enough to hear Mitchell whisper, "Don't look at him." But Keith looked anyway. Our eyes locked for 1 second. I didn't see remorse. I didn't see apology. I saw calculation, measuring me, assessing my resolve, wondering if I'd break on the witness stand, wondering if the father in me would save the son who'd tried to kill me. I looked away first, because I knew something Keith didn't. The father he expected to crumble out of love had died on that hospital bed 7 months ago. The man walking back into that courtroom was harder now, a man who understood that love without accountability isn't love at all. The prosecution called 23 witnesses over the next 3 days, but 3 mattered most: the doctor who saved my life, the investigator who exposed the truth, and my daughter who chose justice over blood. Patrick Reynolds was first. My friend of 20 years walked to the stand with calm authority. Harrington established his credentials, cardiologist, 35 years long QT expert, then got to the point. Dr. Reynolds, can you explain long QT syndrome to the jury? Patrick turned to the jury box. Long QT is a heart rhythm disorder. The electrical signals controlling heartbeat take longer to reset. This can trigger fatal arrhythmias called torsades de pointe. Without immediate treatment, the patient dies. What triggers these arrhythmias? Stress, certain medications, electrolyte imbalances, and magnetic fields above 50 Gauss. Harrington held up the ring. Can you identify this? The ring Keith gave his father. I measured its magnetic field at 198 Gauss. A murmur through the courtroom. Is that dangerous for long QT patients? It's a death sentence. 50 Gauss is the safety threshold. This ring is 4 times that level. Worn continuously for 2 weeks, it would absolutely cause life-threatening arrhythmias. Could this ring have killed Lawrence Preston? Yes. If he'd worn it longer, if we hadn't discovered it when we did, Lawrence would have died. Mitchell's cross-examination tried suggesting alternative causes. Patrick shut each one down. By the time he stepped down, The jury understood that ring was a weapon. Stephen Cross followed. The former FBI agent walked the jury through Keith's digital footprint methodically. Harrington displayed the search history on monitors. Mr. Cross, what did you find on Keith's work computer? Between January 20th and 28th, 2 weeks before the birthday, Keith searched extensively about his father's condition. The searches appeared on screen: long QT syndrome life expectancy, sudden cardiac death statistics, magnetic fields cardiac arrhythmia, how strong magnetic field trigger arrhythmia, how to speed up inheritance. That last one hung like poison. Several jurors shifted uncomfortably. What else? Email correspondence with an anonymous seller. Keith ordered a platinum ring with 200 Gauss magnetic core. The seller warned it was industrial grade. Keith said he was sure. Paid $350 in Bitcoin. But he told his father. $18,500 from a Swiss company. That company doesn't exist. Keith created a fake certificate in Photoshop. We found the file Dad Ring Certificate Final. Mitchell argued the searches could be innocent. Stephen's response was devastating. In 15 years with FBI cybercrime, I've investigated hundreds of cases. This pattern medical vulnerability plus inheritance acceleration is textbook premeditation. After lunch, Dr. Michael Shaw took the stand. The forensic accountant spread financial documents like an autopsy. Casino statements, foundation audits, Bitcoin transactions. Keith owed $4.3 million to casino loan sharks. Deadline June 1st. Threats escalated to violence. He displayed texts. You know what happens if you don't pay. Keith also embezzled $1.2 million from the Preston Foundation. The annual audit was July. If Mr. Preston lived until July, the embezzlement would be discovered. Keith faced 10 years minimum. Shaw pulled up a timeline. Keith needed his father dead before June to pay debts and before July to cover embezzlement. The ring was given February 14th. If Mr. Preston died in the hospital, Keith would have had 4 months to inherit pay debts and erase evidence. So Keith needed his father dead to survive, financially and legally, yes. The next morning, Jake Peterson took the stand. Keith's college friend looked sick taking the oath. When Harrington played the recording, the courtroom went silent. Keith's voice slurred. The old bastard should have been dead by now. I gave him the ring. 2 weeks he'd be gone and I'd be free. Jake's voice. That's your dad. Keith's laugh. My dad's 72. He's had a good life. Me, I'm drowning. The ring was mercy, really. Several jurors looked pale. Mr. Peterson was Keith drunk. Yes, drunk enough to tell the truth, not drunk enough to lie. Did he threaten you? Yes. Said if I told anyone, he'd ruin me. The recording spoke for itself, Keith's own words casual and calculating. Then came Nicole. My daughter walked to the stand in a gray suit, hands trembling but chin up. This was the moment I'd been dreading most. Ms. Preston, you're the defendant's sister. This must be difficult. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's necessary. Tell the jury about the hospital. Nicole described Keith's visit, how he'd asked if I was still wearing the ring, his relief when I said yes, then disappointment when doctors removed it. He seemed frustrated Dad survived. Not relieved. Frustrated. Why support prosecution? Nicole looked at Keith. I kept hoping for another explanation, but the evidence was overwhelming. My brother researched how to kill our father. He commissioned a weapon. He lied. And when it didn't work, He complained like Dad was a failed business deal. Her voice strengthened. I would give everything for my brother to be innocent, but he's not, and I won't let love blind me to that. Mitchell's cross was brutal. Wasn't she jealous? Wasn't this revenge? Nicole's answer silenced the room. I loved my brother. Past tense. The man I loved wouldn't try to kill our father for money. That man died when Keith searched for how to speed up inheritance. What's at that table is someone I don't recognize. Yes, it breaks my heart. But it doesn't change what he did. When she stepped down, she passed Keith's table. He whispered something. Nicole went pale. Later, he said, "You'll regret this, you miserable little bitch. Family is supposed to be loyal." I realized Keith still didn't understand. He thought loyalty meant silence. He thought family meant covering crimes. He'd learned nothing. Watching him sit there defiant and unrepentant, I knew what I had to do. Tomorrow, I would take the stand. Tomorrow, Keith would hear his father say the words I'd never spoken. You are not the man I raised you to be. And that's your failure, not mine. The bailiff called my name. The state calls Lawrence Preston. I stood legs unsteady and walked to the witness stand. The courtroom felt impossibly large and impossibly small at the same time. Every eye on me. Cameras in the gallery. Nicole in the front row, her face pale but determined. And Keith at the defense table staring at me with eyes I no longer recognized. The bailiff held out a Bible. Place your left hand on the book. Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. I sat. The leather chair creaked. Harrington approached with the kind of gentle authority that put witnesses at ease. Mr. Preston, can you tell the jury about raising Keith? I looked at the 12 faces in the jury box, strangers who would decide my son's fate. I raised Keith to value integrity, hard work, accountability. When he graduated college, I gave him a position at Preston Properties. Not because he was my son, but because I believed in second chances. When he failed at the Bellevue Commons project, cost overruns, missed deadlines, I didn't fire him. He was my son. I believed people deserved the chance to learn from mistakes. Did you favor Nicole over Keith? I promoted the person who earned it. Nicole delivered results. Keith chose gambling over responsibility. That wasn't favoritism. That was accountability. Tell the jury about your birthday, February 14th. I took a breath. This was the part I'd been dreading. Keith came to dinner. He brought a gift in a velvet box, a platinum ring with my late wife's initials engraved inside. He told me it cost $18,500, that it was biomagnetic resonance therapy from a Swiss medical company, that I needed to wear it 24/7 for maximum effectiveness. My voice caught. I thought my son loved me. I thought he was trying to help. What happened 2 weeks later? I collapsed during a board meeting, cardiac arrhythmia. I woke up in the hospital not knowing if I'd survive. My cardiologist, Dr. Reynolds, discovered the ring, measured its magnetic field. 198 Gauss, 4 times the safety threshold for someone with my condition. How did that make you feel? I looked directly at Keith. Betrayed, devastated. Because the evidence showed Keith had researched this. He'd searched online for how magnetic fields trigger fatal arrhythmias in long QT patients. He'd searched for how to speed up inheritance while planning my birthday gift. My voice broke. My son researched how to kill me, and then he gave me a weapon disguised as love. Harrington let the silence sit for a moment. Did you want to believe it was a mistake? Desperately. I would have given anything for it to be a misunderstanding, but the evidence was overwhelming. The searches, the emails, the fake certificate, the audio recording where Keith complained I should have been dead already. "Why are you testifying today?" I took a breath, steadying myself. "Because being a good father sometimes means holding your children accountable, even when it breaks your heart, especially when it breaks your heart." Keith made his choices. Now he has to face the consequences. Harrington sat down. Robert Mitchell stood. His cross-examination was surgical, designed to make me look like a cold, vindictive parent. "Mr. Preston, you gave Nicole the COO position Keith had been working toward for years, correct?" "I gave it to the person who earned it." "But that must have hurt Keith." "Losing a promotion hurts. Trying to murder your father over it is criminal." "You claim Keith tried to kill you. But isn't it possible he genuinely believed the ring would help?" "No. The search history proves he knew exactly what he was doing." "Those searches could be interpreted as a son researching his father's condition to find alternative treatments." I leaned forward. "He searched for how to speed up inheritance." "There's no innocent interpretation of that." Mitchell changed tactics. "Mr. Preston, you've testified that you loved Keith. Do you still?" The question hit like a physical blow. I looked at Keith. Really looked at him. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike. The teenager who'd helped me build our first rental property. The man sitting at that table with cold, calculating eyes. I loved the son I thought I had. But that person doesn't exist anymore. Maybe he never did. The man at that table researched how to kill me, commissioned a weapon, and complained when I survived. I don't know who that person is, but he's not my son. If the jury convicts Keith, he'll go to prison for decades. Can you live with that? I met Mitchell's eyes. My son tried to kill me. I'm already living with that. The question is whether he can live with what he's done. Mitchell had no response to that. Judge Thornton called afternoon recess. As I stepped down, I had to walk past Keith's table. Close enough to see the muscle twitching in his jaw. Close enough to hear Mitchell whisper, "Don't react." But Keith's eyes followed me, and what I saw there wasn't remorse or apology. It was rage. Rage that I'd exposed him. Rage that I hadn't saved him. Rage that consequences had finally caught up. The defense rested without calling witnesses. Mitchell had decided the character witnesses couldn't overcome the prosecution's evidence. It was a gamble, hoping the jury would see reasonable doubt in the absence of Keith's voice. But watching the jurors' faces, I could tell they'd already made up their minds. Judge Thornton announced closing arguments would begin tomorrow morning. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed us. Cameras flashing, questions shouted. I barely heard them. I was thinking about Keith's face during my testimony. Not sad, not regretful, angry. Nicole walked beside me, her hand gripping mine. "You did the right thing," she said quietly as we drove home. I nodded, though my chest felt tight. That night, lying in bed, I waited for the guilt to come. Guilt for putting my son in prison. Guilt for choosing justice over mercy. But it didn't come. What came instead was peace. Because I'd told the truth. Because I'd refused to cover for him. Because being a good father sometimes means letting your children face consequences, even when those consequences shatter your heart. I thought about Elizabeth. What she would say if she were here. I knew the answer. She'd tell me I'd done the right thing. That love without accountability isn't love at all. That protecting Keith from justice would have destroyed us both. I closed my eyes and whispered to her memory. I'm sorry I couldn't save him, but I couldn't let him destroy himself either. Outside Seattle, rain drummed against the windows. Inside, for the first time in 7 months, I slept through the night. Tomorrow would bring closing arguments, then jury deliberation, then a verdict. The next morning, Nicole drove me back to the courthouse through heavy rain. We arrived early before the media circus fully assembled. The building felt different somehow, quieter, heavier, like it knew today would bring an ending. Inside the courtroom was already filling. Reporters, spectators, friends and strangers all waiting to see if justice would be served. Closing arguments started at 9. Harrington stood before the jury one final time, his voice calm and certain. Keith Preston researched how to kill his father. He searched online for long QT syndrome, for magnetic contraindications, for cardiac triggers. He searched for how to speed up inheritance while planning his father's birthday gift. He commissioned a weapon, a ring with a 200 Gauss magnetic core, 4 times the safety threshold. He lied about the price, created a fake certificate, insisted his father wear it constantly. And when Lawrence Preston collapsed, Keith showed not relief, but frustration. He told a friend, "The old bastard should have been dead by now." Harrington paused. "This is premeditated attempted murder for financial gain." Keith owed $4.3 million with a June deadline. He'd embezzled $1.2 million with a July audit. He needed his father dead to survive. The evidence is overwhelming. The defendant is guilty. Robert Mitchell followed his tone, warm and sympathetic. Keith made mistakes. He gambled, he panicked. But attempted murder that requires cold, deliberate intent. Those searches. A son researching his father's condition. The ring, a tragic error from what he believed was legitimate. The recording, drunk venting, taken out of context. If Keith wanted to kill his father, would he leave such an obvious trail? Reasonable doubt exists. You must acquit. The jury filed out at 11:45. We waited. Nicole and I sat in a conference room down the hall. Judith brought coffee. Patrick stopped by. The minutes crawled. At 3:30, the bailiff knocked. "They have a verdict." 4 hours. Quick verdicts usually meant conviction. We filed back. The courtroom was packed. Keith sat pale but defiant at the defense table. Judge Thornton entered. "What, has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman stood. "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of attempted murder through reckless endangerment, how do you find dissects guilty?" Thunder in one word. "On the charge of embezzlement, guilty. On the charge of witness intimidation, guilty." I closed my eyes. Relief and grief washed over me. Guilty. On all counts. Keith turned to look at me. His eyes burned with hatred. His lips moved. "I hope you're happy." I didn't look away. Not happy, but safe. Judge Thornton scheduled sentencing for November 5th. Keith was remanded to custody. As bailiffs led him away in handcuffs, he didn't look back. Outside, reporters swarmed. I stopped on the courthouse steps. Justice was served today. My son made choices that endangered my life and stole from my late wife's charity. The jury held him accountable. That's all I have to say. That night, I sat in my study staring at a photo of Keith at age 8. Gap-toothed grin, fish in his hands, Lake Washington behind him, guilty. I put the photo in a drawer and closed it. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Keith stood before Judge Thornton in an orange jumpsuit. Mitchell pleaded for leniency. Harrington countered with Keith's lack of remorse. "Mr. Preston, do you have anything to say?" Judge Thornton asked. Keith's jaw tightened. "I was trying to help my father. This trial is a miscarriage of justice." Still denying. Still blaming. Judge Thornton's voice turned cold. "Mr. Preston, you researched how to kill your father in methodical detail. You commissioned a weapon exploiting his medical vulnerability. You lied repeatedly. You showed no concern when he collapsed, only frustration your plan failed. You continue to deny responsibility. She paused. On attempted murder, I sentence you to 8 years in Washington State Penitentiary. On embezzlement, 3 years concurrent. You will pay restitution of $1.2 million to the Preston Foundation. You will pay a fine of $150,000. Upon release, 5 years supervised probation. 8 years. Keith went pale. The bailiffs led him away. He looked back once. Our eyes met. I saw nothing. No remorse. Just rage. That was the last time I saw my son. Spring arrived 18 months later. I stood in my office on the 58th floor watching Seattle wake beneath rare blue sky. Cherry blossoms lined the streets. Nicole walked in with coffee. "Morning, Dad. Board meeting in 20." She was CEO now. Under her leadership, Preston Properties had grown to $780 million. The waterfront project completed ahead of schedule. Our reputation recovered stronger. "And how's Emma?" Her face lit up. "Piano recital Friday. She wants you front row." "I'll be there." My granddaughter, 5 years old. She'd never met Keith. Never would. Patrick Reynolds and I still met for coffee every Tuesday. He'd published a paper on magnetic device dangers citing my case. His research had saved lives. "How are you sleeping?" he'd asked last week. "Better. Nightmares stopped around Christmas." And Keith? He's at Walla Walla, refuses visits. Nicole tried twice. He sent letters back unopened. The counselor says he shows no remorse, blames us for ruining his life. Any chance of parole? Not for 6 years minimum, and he'd need to show rehabilitation. Keith can't admit he did anything wrong. Patrick shook his head. "Some people never learn." I'd forgiven Keith. Not for his sake, he didn't deserve it and wouldn't accept it, but for mine. Carrying hatred was like drinking poison and expecting him to die. But I didn't expect an apology. Didn't hope for reconciliation. That evening, I had dinner with Nicole and Emma at my house. We used Elizabeth's china, made her chocolate cake recipe, laughed over Emma's kindergarten stories. After Emma colored at the table, Nicole and I watched sunset over Puget Sound. "Dad, are you happy?" I thought about Keith in prison, about the trial, about the son I'd lost and daughter I'd kept, about the granddaughter I'd gained. Yes, I am. No regrets. Only that I didn't see it sooner. But no regrets about pressing charges. You saved my life. She squeezed my hand. We saved each other. Later, I stood looking at Elizabeth's photo on the mantel. 30th anniversary in the San Juans. She looked happy, whole. "I kept our family safe," I whispered. "It cost me our son, but I'd make the same choice again." Elizabeth would have made the same choice. She'd taught me that love meant accountability, that protecting people from consequences wasn't kindness, it was cruelty disguised as mercy. I'd loved Keith, but I'd loved truth and justice more. That was what integrity meant. I opened my laptop and emailed the National Domestic Violence Hotline offering to speak about elder abuse and financial exploitation. I attached my story. If my pain could prevent someone else's nightmare, it meant something. If my story could save one life, the journey was worth it. I hit send. Outside Seattle, rain started again, soft and steady. Inside, I felt peace. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by loyalty, honesty, and love. By showing up when it's hard. By telling truth when lying would be easier. By choosing right over comfortable. Sometimes the most loving thing is holding someone accountable even when it shatters your heart. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you were born into. I looked around my study. Nicole's photo on my desk, her business school graduation, both of us grinning. Emma's crayon drawing taped to the wall, "I love Grandpa," in wobbly letters. The empty space where Keith's photos used to be. This was my family now. Not the son who valued my life at $348 million, but the daughter who had the courage to stop him. The granddaughter who brought joy. The friends who stood beside me. The community built through decades of integrity. This was family. Real family. The kind that mattered. And I was finally truly home. I'm 74 now, sitting in the garden where Elizabeth once planted roses. The ring that nearly killed me sits in an evidence locker somewhere, but the lessons it taught me bloom fresh every morning. Don't be like me. Don't wait until betrayal forces your eyes open to see what's been rotting beneath the surface of your family. I spent decades building an empire while my son hollowed himself out with greed, and I convinced myself that love meant overlooking his flaws. I was wrong. Love means holding people accountable before their choices destroy them and you. I learned that family isn't defined by blood, but by integrity. Nicole proved that. Stephen Cross, Dr. Reynolds, even Judith, they showed more loyalty than my own son because they valued truth over comfort. Keith wore my name, but rejected everything it should have stood for. God gave me a second chance when that magnetic field should have stopped my heart. Jesus taught us to forgive, and I have, but forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. Christ's grace covers sins, but it doesn't excuse us from facing the wreckage we create. Keith needed to face his choices not for revenge, but because real redemption starts with accountability. The hardest lesson. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone fall. I wish I'd learned that 30 years ago when Keith first showed signs of entitlement and recklessness. Maybe I could have saved him from himself. Maybe things would be different now. But I can't change the past. I can only share what I've learned and hope it helps someone else avoid my mistakes. I appreciate you journeying through this story with me. If you've made it this far, drop the number 2 in the comments so I know you're still with me. Fair warning. This narrative contains fictionalized elements crafted for reflection and learning. While core themes of betrayal and accountability reflect real human experiences, details are dramatized for privacy. If this isn't for you, no hard feelings, find content that suits you better. But if something here resonated, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. The truth is always worth telling, even when it costs everything.